officially we have a quorum. So we can begin. Sorry for the delay at 6:05, which is not your fault.
My fault.
It is not your fault.
Thanks.
We were having technical difficulties
Okay,
anyway.
good, thanks.
And we are just going to Zoom in off of my computer because we didn't want to mess with the system yet as it's got issues.
Do we have any Zoomers?
There's nobody there at this moment.
Okay.
So I'm just gonna, are you okay with that, Howard?
I didn't expect anybody, actually.
No, neither did I, but it's good. So.
Did you notice I was making a plug to the Conservation Advisory Commission to have legislative
I
powers the
know.
other day?
I know. I'm not sure if anybody,
They didn't notice.
Well,
They didn't
You have
understand.
to become a CAB,
No, I know.
yeah,
but we could try that.
I know. I think I
Because we
think
do
we
most of what
should.
a CAB does.
right.
It's not a big.
Because I
leap.
could feel some pushback in the room that they didn't think the Conservation Advisory Commission was very important.
There's a lot of pushback in the room.
Why?
They just
They
don't, they
want-
just,
They don't like people telling them
what to do.
Oh, but they like telling people what to do.
Yeah.
Okay, fair enough.
It's okay.
Sure.
So I'll go ahead. I know, we all feel the same way, but
I hate being told what to do.
every day I have the problem. So hold on, we
Hi,
have
Leslie.
Leslie. She made it. She's gonna come on. I knew I was trying to.
We-
Hey, Leslie,
You're mute.
you're on mute.
We can't
Oh,
hear you.
sorry. I tried to join on my computer. I'm at my father's house in New Jersey and I couldn't,
We
I don't know
still
what his
can't hear
Wi-Fi
you.
is. So now I'm on my
You need to
phone.
unmute her.
Oh, you can't hear me? I think it's you guys.
Oh, it's me.
It
Hi.
is you. Hi, sorry. I don't know the Wi-Fi password to my dad's house. So sorry to have my phone up to my face like this. I'm trying to get on my computer. So,
We're starting late. We haven't actually officially started,
okay. Oh,
but we
okay, perfect.
have met our quorum and we're just gonna start now.
Excellent. Okay, I'll mute myself then so I don't bother you guys or get an echo or anything.
All right, thank you.
Okay.
So we'll start by approving the minutes of May 4th, last meeting, and we had several comments, corrections, and changes, which was mainly Shannon's name.
Got that.
And
Johnson property.
Johnson property
and
corrected,
Walbridge Farm.
and Walbridge was one word, and mid, I don't know how to say it.
Magid?
MIGID.
M-A-G-I-D?
But spell that correctly.
M-I-G-I-D.
M-I-G-I-D.
M-I-G-A-D?
I-D.
M-I-G-I-D.
M-A-G-I-D.
M-A-G-I-D.
I think it's M-I-G-A-D.
Magic.
And then assess instead of access.
And other things.
And there
some
was a
stuff that-
couple, I think there were a couple of other things that,
Yeah, that got
that,
changed.
that got.
Lisa, it's good we've got close readers.
Whatever
That's
I
a
wrote.
big
In the
job.
video.
That's a
this-
big job.
Yeah,
Right, right. And yeah, and then you did correct the ZBA portion, and that was, and I think everyone agreed on those.
Mhm.
If anybody
So
wants to step up, yeah, that's okay.
you're doing a great job.
You're
doing
Hey,
an
you're doing a
awesome
great
job.
job. So can I have a motion to accept the minutes
move
as
to accept.
approved? I mean, as corrected?
And I second that.
Shannon, and then second for Elizabeth. So moved. Thank you. We'll get those prepared for posting tomorrow. We have a quick update on the CSC, Climate Smart Community. I spoke to Adelaide, and she's just wanted to let me know that we're still, working on the list of them, what of importance, what might be our priorities, and that she has spoken with Sean Carroll at Cornell, and is also included part of our natural resource inventory as a part of her conversation with him. Continuing to hopefully chat with the board and Leslie to get one of the town board members as a lead member and contributor to the CSC. And then Shannon, if you had anything to add to that?
I look back at the only other thing that we've talked about since our last meeting was the Hudsonia habitat, important habitats in town of Washington, the Hudsonia report.
Right.
That's a little older. The digital maps
Right.
have a lot more granularity than the printed ones and may
Right.
be useful.
Okay.
Sorry.
And another thing I was gonna say is all of these maps that we did with the CRP, oh gosh, you know what I'm talking about. The CPRC are updated on that as well. So a lot of those are gonna be beneficial. And I think if we utilize
Yeah.
those and get them bigger.
That's
Leslie?
Yeah, that's what I was just going to ask that question or maybe make that point that I was so impressed by those maps.
These maps are amazing.
Yeah, and Shannon, I don't know if you've seen them, but they are covering things I didn't even know
Yeah, they are
could be
amazing.
covered.
These are not some of the updated ones, but they say the specifics of what lands can be farmed, which, you know, where the protections
seen it.
are.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have these blown up, Leslie, and have a copy for the town and a copy for our office.
I mean,
Yeah, because I'd love to find out from PACE or from NAN or from AKRF what is the best practice for keeping these maps so that the committees are able to access them. You know,
Right.
because we talk about, you know, frequently when you're talking about a site plan or we just had a planning board meeting last night, which Margaret, you were there, and Howard, you were there too. And, you know, the question always is, well, where are the wetlands or what else is there? What's happening in the neighboring property? You're not going to have the exact, you're not
Right.
going to be able to see that exactly from these larger aerial maps, but it at least will give you a sense of what's around it so that we can ask those
Correct.
questions, you know, or get the answers, I guess, to some of those
Right.
questions.
So that's kind of what I was thinking with blowing these up for the town and, you know, just giving them a better grip on what they're looking at when they're having a conversation in the room.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Yep.
say that they're prepared by Upstate GIS. I mean, it would be beneficial to have the digital versions.
So we have the PDFs. Those are on the website right now as a part of our survey. And what should we ask for? Anything?
It'd be nice to have the GPS kind of spatially rectified maps so you could zoom in.
Yeah,
The PDFs, you may not be able to zoom in.
Zoom as
right?
well. So a
Um,
digital version of,
Yeah, the GIS version.
just the GIS digital
The
version.
shape file.
Yeah, there's no metadata. I didn't want to bring it up, but there's no metadata and it doesn't quite match with some of the maps we already have on file, like the one that I could not square together was the land use, the ones in conservation easement. It doesn't match the one we got from the DLC a while back. The DLC has a lot more
I
land and
think that
conservation.
did you look at the updated one?
Yes.
Okay, because I thought that they said they were getting the DLC updated one. These ones
Well,
are
maybe
not,
the only
these are
ones I
not.
had. Maybe they did it again? Is that what you're saying?
I put the updated ones up
Yes, they were going to do it again because there were
Yeah.
missing some of the DLC.
because they said the
From what I
DLC
understand.
one alone. So I'll double check it anyway.
Well, because this is, it's a slightly different green. It's a little confusing.
It is
but
really
this
hard to
is
tell of
conserved
some of it.
Buildable land.
But because this,
Sorry.
this is,
Buildable
Oh,
land.
because
It's
you think it's
everywhere.
master program.
see, this is, if you look, this green is slightly different.
But
from
if
the
you,
green.
so this does show
what you're saying.
buildable land. This is where it gets confusing, even though it shows all of this as buildable. If you look on another natural resource, it isn't because of topography or
Steep-
whatever.
steep
The,
slopes
yeah,
and,
the sloping, the wetlands,
And there's a lot more on the DLC map, but you said they're updating that.
yeah.
You know what I did notice today, which I was really happy about? I noticed signs on Little Rest Road across from Winley. There's some signs for conserved land that are new
Oh,
signs.
nice.
And also on Mabbittsville Road, there's some property before Daheim that's newly conserved as well.
Cool.
That farm property, which I was delighted about.
Oh, cool. That's
And you
very
know
nice.
what? It's so, this is fascinating to me to look at this permeable deposits directly overlying the aquifer and less permeable deposits
Mhm.
located upgrading from the aquifer. It's 100% where Migdale is. And they tried to tell us that it wasn't going to affect the
Okay,
aquifer.
this brings up, I don't know, Margaret, if
This
you want to
is-
get into it with them. They have to tell you
This is
what their
McDowell.
data source was.
That's
and what-
McDowell?
and
This is
what the-
McDowell here.
And what the date was for the data
Ah,
source.
okay, so
This
I'm wrong.
is,
Okay, I was wrong.
home free
Uh-huh.
is here.
Yeah.
This
Yeah,
is
but it
home
runs,
free.
but
This is
McDale's
McDowell.
here, but that runs right down.
It does run
into-
into all
We
of
had
this. That is,
problem
and
It's
this is,
uphill from that.
right, and if you look at it, then you see the topography and what can and can't happen there.
Aquifers didn't match up.
Okay.
Yeah,
so I'm wrong.
so you kind of need a living map, like something that's.
Right, so, but that's
Updated.
part of what our natural resource
yeah.
inventory map is gonna do for us. And that we still have to wait for until it's all updated with the state.
What is a hydric soil?
It's a wetland soil.
Okay.
Basically wetland.
Yeah,
Different types. The delineator will tell you which types, subsets of soil are in there, but for our purposes, it's just wetland.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
so anything else, Shannon, on that?
No, it's
All right, that's
great to
good.
get all the resources existing.
Yeah,
to-
yeah, and that is part of what we're working on, I'm working on.
And did we talk, was there some discussion about having a committee that's gonna look into the natural resources in the town of Washington?
We will,
Okay, just because I know somebody who might be good.
okay.
I tried getting in touch with her and I haven't heard back.
Okay,
from her.
yeah, no, so I mean, right now, it's only in my hands because
Yeah.
they're updating the state resources. So
Okay.
until they finish their updating, there's not much we can do.
Okay,
But yes, definitely. If
Okay.
you- if you
Dutchess
know-
County too.
Dutchess County, yeah,
updating,
it's everyone's, and it's
Yeah.
like the middle of next year, it's gonna be ready. So the mapping goes into the CPRC portion of our meeting. Nothing really to report besides the fact that the survey the results are online and everyone should read them. There's the updating maps, which is what we were referring to, and the next meeting for that is June 16th,
June
5,
16th, unfortunately,
five-
I'm gonna be away.
yeah, 5 PM. It's a Zoom.
June
And it's going to
16th.
be discussing the economic side of it, the report, and then more of a final linking of the reports of all of it. So,
Well, so I got, my takeaway from that, I'm gonna write down my calendar. My takeaway from that is that once people wanted like 4 to 10 size, and once you get past 20 rooms, it totally
it
dropped
drops.
off,
Yes, it does drop.
which is good.
So, yeah, well, I mean, everyone's consistent, that's for sure. So
Well,
that's,
now that we're on that, one of my problems I raised, but I didn't get an answer from them, is they added 3 zones to where they thought it was the best places, additional places to put them.
Mhm.
And then they asked people to vote, but they didn't ask people to identify if they lived where they lived.
if they lived where they voted for them to be, right?
No, no, there's no way to tell who voted. Let's just say, for example, the Cottonwood Inn, which everybody likes anyway.
Yeah.
But let's say it has a lot of votes. How many people lived in that little section that they,
Very few.
Very few.
so that they didn't, was a simple question. Do you live in the place that you voted for? And they left it out for some reason, which would have been very helpful because you may have found out that the people who live there have a lot of concerns about it, but they're not part of the survey necessarily, or didn't vote.
But what was interesting though, is I think that the village was a very popular place to have hospitality,
Mm.
both for people who live in the village as well as people who live in the town. So I think there's a part answer.
Yeah.
Well, when they did the last 2 comprehensive plans, and the idea was to preserve the rural part of the town. That was the purpose of those plans, actually. And they decided that the best way to do that was to keep the village in the village and to eliminate any zoning that's outside the village boundaries, which looks like an extension of something from the village. In other words, make a sharp wording on that. It's something like make a delineation between the town boundary and the village boundary. And the village is our commercial center, so on and so on. It's like if it was a zone, if the village wasn't a village, it would be one of another zoning district.
Mhm.
So the intent was not to let the village sprawl out into town because that's the beginning of
That
how
makes sense.
everything changes.
Mhm.
Once you start a sprawl, it never gets less, it always gets more.
Mhm.
And somebody drew a line around the village and said, let's put hospitality here as well, which is why they had 2 major comprehensive plans to avoid that.
Mhm.
Because
Mhm.
in the end, you'll wind up like Poughkeepsie did, where the center hollowed out and all the stuff.
Well, I
went down
think it
Route
was a little
9.
tricky though, when they said hospitality near the village. It wasn't delineated what hospitality near the village was. I mean, I think the obvious places, obviously, the two top places were the Village and Washington Hollow.
Correct, yeah.
So, and
Well-
but I think you make a good point, 'cause we don't want sprawl.
Mm-mm.
That's how sprawl starts. And I'm going back in time a little because I do that once in a while. I remember when Lucky Platt was in Poughkeepsie,
Me
Mhm.
too.
and some of you may remember that too.
My husband used to shop there when he was a kid.
And then they built like a little park around there or
Mhm.
something. And pretty soon stuff started to sprawl out.
Mhm.
Route 9 at one time, this is before my time even, Route 9 was a dirt road almost at one time, a single lane road. And all of this just sprawled out in the center of Poughkeepsie, hollowed out, and it's not as nice as it should be, it could have been.
Well, don't you think the center of Poughkeepsie also got hollowed out because of the arterial? That was the real death of
That was,
Main
Thank
Street
you.
Poughkeepsie.
Mm.
Me, yeah.
Yeah.
When they did the 3 lanes and they closed down Main Street.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's what they did. They built the park in the center, and all,
Yeah.
Lucky Flat was still there when they did that.
Yeah,
And it hollowed out the center because it sprawled out down on the new Route 9, and all the businesses left.
yeah.
Our comprehensive plans had the intent of not having that happen to the town. Keep the town rural,
Mhm.
keep the village where it is, and don't move out little by little. You will move out and it'll get bigger and bigger. So I was
That's
a little
why they-
disturbed to see that around the
But
village.
that's a good point, also because they think that the whole idea of the commercial district of Mabbittsville, the quote unquote commercial district of Mabbittsville should stay super tight.
Yes,
It should stay exactly what it is, and it should
Mhm.
not be allowed to develop further. Because that would cause sprawl too.
that's
Right.
another issue which we could talk about a little bit later when we get to the planning board.
Okay,
Something came up, is exactly what you said.
okay.
So the only place really that's grandfathered, it technically is the Cottonwood Inn area.
And the Cottonwood, as far as I'm concerned, between the Cottonwood and the Millbrook Inn, our hospitality needs are pretty much met.
Mm.
Yeah, so I was disturbed when they did that because it looked to me like they're opening up, and most people don't want that if they think about it, just like we talk. They don't want sprawl to come into the town because they spent 2 full comprehensive plans with the idea of how do we keep this town rural and agricultural and protect the environment. And the consensus was you don't let the village come into the town.
Yeah.
Because that's how it starts.
That makes sense. And then, so that's an important thing to keep in mind going forward with CPRC.
And I'm also willing to say that if you found out who voted for it, you wouldn't find hardly anybody around the village per se who voted to put it there. Because most people, human nature being what it is, really, don't want too much
NIMBY,
hospitality
baby.
next to them. They didn't ask that question.
I
No.
know. It
You
it
don't
was
know
a
who's
question we
coming
tried to
in,
get on
you
there,
don't
but,
know what, yeah.
all right. Well,
Maybe or somebody will write a comment too, and you got a week for more comments.
yeah, you've
So-
got, which is the other thing is not one person has emailed us for a question on the results from the survey.
I wasn't aware of that myself, to be honest, that there was a deadline that you could
The
email. it.
13th, it's
they had
actually,
asked.
I didn't
No,
have
we
any
said it-
questions,
we-
actually. I thought it was
well,
pretty straightforward.
correct, because it's so obvious. You don't really have
Yeah.
any, but just so you know, until the 13th, you
Yeah.
can email us and present them any questions.
Well, that's
So-
one of my questions. How are you going to address the fact that you added an area? Also.
Yeah, you,
Not to do that
you
now.
feel,
Not
you
to
feel
do
free
that
to
now.
email the CPRC. We'll be happy to respond or let the planners respond, of course. All right, let's go to new business. So go ahead and give us the updates on planning and ZBA, if you would,
All
Howard.
right, this will be relatively short because
You're so
We
cute.
could-
You say that every time.
He does.
He does. I have it on
said
video.
relative.
I have it on
Relative,
tape.
relative.
Did you
I
get
didn't
my
say
email?
short.
Did you
I
get my
said-
email,
I
Howard?
said relative. Let's go to the ZBA
No,
first.
first question. Did you get my email earlier?
Where'd you go?
Which one?
Here, Red Oaksville.
Make it brief.
I'll always make it good.
Might as well go
Yeah.
that way.
This is for you, for any
Oh, thank
information you
you.
might need.
Oh,
That's the ZBA was very brief. They had a person who was previously approved at the Lithgow Church, which is the information for the address is on there. And they wanted to add 18 inches to the approved area variance that they had. 18 inches. And they had a lot of documentation and they came and 5 minutes later, it was all approved. And there was nothing that involved us at all because it was pre-approved before and just 18 extra inches and
Was for a ramp for the handicap.
yeah. But
Very-
so the only change was a pre-approved ramp that had nothing to do with us as a Conservation Advisory Commission. And they made it 18 inches bigger because they felt they were compelled to come back for that 18 inches.
Alrighty.
All right, now. Okay, now we have the Perkins Palladium lot line change. That was basically, that's the Walbridge area.
One
And
word.
You'll
One
have that one
L.
down.
the planning board is treating these things as lot line changes only, which means that it's their view on a lot line change is that there's nothing that they need to be involved in. It's just a lot line change. It's just moving stuff on a map.
Mhm.
We
To do
did,
with the Perkins house? To do with the house on the property or to do with the Walbridge Farm property?
it's a one big property that they're
Mhm.
subdividing into two parcels.
Because I did also, one thing I did notice also today is that the Walbridge Farm property, it says is land, I just saw a sign today saying that that property's been conserved, is in conservation now.
Yes, that's.
Howard, are you talking about this was discussed at the planning board meeting on Monday, or did you talking about the last planning board meeting?
I'm talking about the
Because
one.
it wasn't discussed last night. What?
Not the ZBA already.
This is the, oh, okay. This is the planning board. Okay, sorry.
This is the planning board from last night, finishing up on the Perkins Palladium application, which is now complete. They just.
Yeah, I thought that they said there was nothing okay, sorry. I misunderstood what I just wanted to make sure we were talking about the same meeting date. Okay.
Yeah, there was nothing but some technical stuff at this point with the maps and so on that they needed from the last meeting before that. So that's approved, that's done. The only comment that we made was we would like to at least see the wetlands on the map, and I think Brian said they were, the surveyor said they
Yes.
were on the map, but they're not delineated. So you don't see the buffers and stuff like that. So that was done, it was relatively fast. Okay, the Bonnecue subdivision was pretty much the same thing. It's a little bit bigger. It involves 3 parcels on 296 acres or something like that, according to the map there from parcel access. And it's basically lot line changes again at this point. Some will be in conservation, some will have walking trails and so on. At the moment, they're not planning to build anything, so it doesn't trigger, according to the planning board's view at least, doesn't trigger anything involving the CAC because it's just drawing lines on a map again. So he's coming back again on July, I think Brian House and his surveyor is coming back again on July 5th. Again, the same thing as with Perkins to do some technical additions that they wanted that they requested. So that's it for us on that at the moment, unless they decide to develop and build. And some of that will be in conservation easement.
Yes.
All right, now the third one was Ryan Kiernan, discussion on an application for a special permit for professional offices at 3699 Route 44 in Mabbittsville. That's basically the deli that was there before. That's the Stagecoach Deli. The planning board, there was some discussion on it, because this is
Is that it's that Adirondack Realty Company or
Yes.
something? Yeah.
He wants to do offices?
well,
It's going to be
the
office
building-
downstairs.
Mabbittsville has a rather strange zoning. It's called the Mabbittsville Hamlet. And in that, it's a mixed use hamlet. In that hamlet, the primary use in the hamlet is residential. This was done 2 comprehensive plans ago to make sure that that doesn't expand and become a second little village and pull business out of the village. It was done, if I remember correctly, in the 1989 master plan that they did that. And in order to ensure that that happens, they put in a clause that said, if you have any new commercial development in that hamlet, you have to have twice as much new residential development in the hamlet in prior 2 years
So it balances.
to balance it
To
out.
keep it
Because they
balanced.
wanted it to be rural and more residential than commercial. They didn't want it to turn into, like you see in some places, a small little strip mall type commercial place.
Well,
And that was to protect the village and to protect the environment, everything around it, because those things grow again, the same problem. All right, so why is this part of this application? Well, there's a clause in there that says everything, the only allowed use, by the way, let me rephrase it, is residential use by right. So if you have property, you have, in Mavisville, you have a right to develop it residentially as long as you fit in the parameters of the lot. Everything else in there is by special use permit only. Because if you look at the zoning code, there's by right, and then there's special use for the uses in the hamlet. Now, special use permits lapse after a year and a day if they're not used. And so what does it revert back to? It reverts back to the normal allowed use in the district. And the only allowed use in the district is residential 1 and 2 family. All right, so this place has lapsed for over a year, more than a year.
Yeah, it's been empty for a few years.
It's been empty for a few years. So the only use it should have now is residential. And to become a special use on the list of special uses, if you're doing stuff like that, you need to make a new commercial, as we discussed earlier, you need twice as much new residential, which didn't happen.
That's tricky.
So it's very tricky.
They can't use or renew from the application because it must have met the criteria the first time, but now it doesn't.
It's a special use. If you look at the zoning code, every zone, including where you live, has special uses. And in your case, mining is not one of the special uses anymore. It's been removed.
I know.
So you can't have that use and get to, and they would have to go to if it was still there, they would go to the planning board and they would say, I want to use that special use. And the planning board would look at it and say, all right, you could do that, but they can't. So all special uses have to be approved. Now, what happened is this particular special use of commercial restaurant or deli, whatever they called it, lapsed over 2 years ago.
Yeah, that's been a while.
Lapsed for a while. So the only use allowed on the property is the primary use, it be allowed by right use. The planning board didn't see it that way. So what happened is the zoning administrator came and he looked at it and said, yeah, you need to get a permit. What he should have said is you have a violation at the moment because you're running a business without a permit. Again, the planning board, in my opinion, not theirs, in my opinion, the planning board made a decision to ignore that technical clause, because they're trying to get it done and it's the right thing to do and so on. So he has to come back now and submit a site plan at the next meeting, which is July 5th. I mean, not that it's a bad use or anything, but the meeting before that, Andrew Spence had put notes into the minutes that the applicant is responsible for making sure he follows all the rules. And they approved those minutes. So it was kind of a mixed up thing. And the only reason I'm at all concerned about it, what happens next if another thing like this comes up again?
It creates its potential
Yeah.
precedent.
It's
Yeah.
going to keep happening.
And you don't know what the next use is going to be that they can pull out of there.
Or where?
So I think it is important to follow that to the letter and make sure that it does get a special use permit, because that's the whole point.
Well, it's going to get the special use permit, but they're going about it
Backwards.
the same way that they always go about things. It's fix the problem that somebody's created instead of making people do it the way it's supposed to be done. Technically, they should have done a cease and desist immediately. And, they don't have to move the furniture out or anything. They just can't do business there, come to the planning board, then get the permit and then reopen.
No, it's
as
more
your
than
business.
that. They would have to go to, technically, in my mind, go to the ZBA
Right.
because it doesn't fit the code at all,
So
which
then,
they could do. The
yeah.
ZBA
So I
could.
mean, there are other steps that should have happened, but and I get what they're trying to do. They are trying to accommodate
An
The person-
existing business.
the
they
person.
don't
Well, the
want-
person I think is leasing it, so they don't own the building. They're leasing, so they obviously were told they could do it. So they are in a hard spot as well. It is a less invasive business than what the deli was.
Oh, for sure.
It's going to be very quiet. It's, you know, like 9 to 5 or whatever, you know,
Yeah.
it's 5 days a week. So it's not like it's a big deal like that. It's just really setting the precedence of doing things, continually doing them wrong.
Does the person that they brought in to assess, you know, she came
The
in to-
consultant.
Tiffany
Does
and
she-
Jessica.
Does she have
No.
any
So
say?
there is a consultant, Aaron, and he
Oh, Aaron.
he
okay.
did actually write an email that stated that, you know, in some cases you have to cure the violation before you can do the permit, which is what we're saying, which is the cease and desist, and then you can go forward. But they waived all that as well.
And with that as well,
Oh,
just like, well, I'm not gonna say.
I think
You know, I don't mean to interrupt, guys. I wonder if we're not talking about kind of the update as it relates to an environmental concern for the CAC, if it would, I don't have the answer to it. I just don't know if it's helpful to have other committees assessing other committees' decisions. Does that make, if it doesn't have to do with,
So
Your
I
part.
agree, I do agree with you, Leslie, except for that the CAC is based on natural and man-made environment. We are allowed to comment on that. And is that
right, but I think you should formally comment then to directly to, and I know you sent an email, Margaret, to
Yeah,
the planning board and have that input, because that person's coming back again for a public hearing, as opposed to having a conversation, because there was lengthy discussion last night, and not only was Aaron offered his expert opinion and Jeff Battistoni offered his legal guidance as well, so it wasn't like that board was operating without counsel, either you know, in two different forms, both legal and a consultant. So I just only bring that up because I just don't know. The man-made question is an interesting point. I just, in terms of how each committee should be working with each other, I just don't know if having a debate about their decision that they made last night when it actually isn't quite finalized or maybe it is, maybe this is the right form, and then you can make a written recommendation to them. I don't know what the best practice is there. And I think it actually would be, at least for me, helpful to understand and helpful for me to, maybe for us to ask Pace that question the next time we see them about how, in terms of the sequencing of, you know, great to update on what's coming and what environmental impacts. I guess the man-made piece I wasn't as hadn't considered. So
well, so probably, you know, some people in the room doesn't understand some of the HM Hamlet district, you know, regulations either. So that's why we were, you know, bringing it up and discussing that.
that makes sense.
So, but as you say, I mean, so now we all know what we were talking about. And if anyone wanted to write a letter for the public hearing, you know, we're free to do that.
We wasn't fully submitted at this point.
Oh, you wrote something already?
No, I just wrote to Aaron to
Oh, okay.
let him know what was going on, since he was now the consultant for the planning board.
Oh, okay.
And that's pretty much it.
Okay.
Something like that.
All right. Well, I mean, they know, they definitely know what I think of at this point.
And I shared it with Jeff, and
Nobody ever knows, right?
So, I mean, it's all good. I mean, obviously,
All
we
right,
don't,
so-
we want, and the wording I put in my email this morning was that, you know what, every procedure sheet should be the same. Every applicant is treated the same. Every board does the same. This is what we're requesting. And, you know, it's basically all we're saying.
It seems to me in my limited time here, it seems like that things are starting to be held to the same standard.
They are getting closer, yes. And with the PACE training, with
That'll
the
be super helpful.
consultants. I can't even tell you, it's so much better. And now that we have Kristen being the secretary for the planning board and the ZBA, it's amazingly better. So, and everyone knows that it was a hard road to get to and that it needed fixing. So it's improving, but you've still got to stay consistent. And the code says one thing and you got to do what the code says. Until we change it, we can't make applications work for the code. They have to work the code, the code does the work. So you can't be fluid. You kind of got to stick to what it says until you change it. And we haven't changed it yet.
Well, that's what the planning board said. We only interpret the code. That's their statement all the
I
time,
know. So,
that we're bound by what's written, that we don't make code.
so
I know Nicole Drury is a real stickler for doing things correctly.
yes, she is.
Yes, Nicole was concerned about we'll call it the conundrum that the applicant presented.
Mhm.
But he was actually already operational without a permit, which should have been, in my opinion, should have been a cease and desist first. But the zoning administrator is very busy and he's still learning a little bit. He's quite good, by the way.
He's
Personally,
Very good so far. I've
Well, he
seen good
takes
things.
things seriously.
Yeah, well, and it's his job. He's not doing it part-time. This is what he does. And it's, the building side and the zoning side, it's it jives together. So he's doing great.
yeah, I'm very personally, just a little plug for him. Very pleased with how he's performing so far.
I agree.
All right. Well, is there any other comments or questions?
Those are the board things that occur to two boards.
Mhm.
The town board meeting, I don't think much happened there. I can recall at the moment. At least I didn't write any notes down on it that.
All right. Well, we had a very good PACE training session.
Mhm.
It was good and informative, and looking forward to the next one. You couldn't make it, Shannon, right? And were you logged on or anything?
I did
Okay.
not. I wasn't home.
It's all right. The next one is on the 16th, isn't
The
it?
21st or
22nd. Sorry, it's the
I'll
22nd.
zoom into that. one.
Yes. So I was like, I've got too many meetings, unfortunately. So that'll be good. And I believe, Howard, you wanted to discuss a noise ordinance again.
Well, yeah, I think, this is the appropriate time to make sure the town is interested and aware that we're probably one of the few towns in the county, or at least in the local area for sure, that does not have any noise ordinance. A noise ordinance would have solved, just off the top of my head, would have solved several problems if it was and the village has one, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
For example, the Silverbrook thing that came up recently, where they were given a cease and desist, but in the meantime, they had very noisy people there, and several neighbors came to the town board to complain about it. And a noise ordinance probably would have been appropriate in that case. Then we're all familiar with Taylor.
Mhm.
That problem could have been solved very easily if there was a noise ordinance, because that was one of the major complaints of the neighbors, that they would start these trucks up at like 5 o'clock in the morning or whatever, and the neighbors would be exposed to this noise all day. And that too would be something a noise ordinance might have had some bearing on. Then there's the Danielle incident, which you guys probably don't remember, but a few years back, Mr. Danielle, who is on 9 Partners Road, and you can see his storefront when you go down 44.
Yeah.
He wanted to have a motorcycle crew they run motorcycles on the property all the time. The town board eventually decided that was not an appropriate use for that residential zone. If there was a noise ordinance in place, he probably wouldn't have started that in the first place, or it would have not been as big a concern to the neighbors. And then we have the most recent one, which is the mailman project with all of these trucks. Again, if there was a noise ordinance,
Blasting trucks, there would have been a lot of, you can't dig quietly.
a noise ordinance may have been part of maybe a consideration before that project further into everything. So what I'm saying is I think we just need to make the board available if there's noise, that we need to be like the other towns. We don't have to say too much. Something to the effect that, we would like the town board to look into this and consider how they would like to, if they think it's worthwhile, something like that. Somebody who's a good writer, and they should consider taking steps to bring that about. That's pretty much what happened with the solar ordinance, for example. They looked at it and they said, yeah, we got it. Carrie is pushing us for solar and other people are coming for solar applications. We need to have something in our code for solar, which we don't have, and wind turbines. So they decided it was time to do that. And they put together a committee, a volunteer committee with 2 town board members, and took about 6 months or less. And we now have a solar
Thank
section
goodness
in
for
the
the
code.
solar ordinance.
So I'm suggesting that we who look at the man-made and the natural environment, just raise that question with them, that this is something, the time has come for them, given what I quoted and what's going on now. And then the Airbnbs are another problem that's coming along. You want to be a neighbor next to somebody who has a noisy Airbnb and be nothing you could do about it. So I'm suggesting, hopefully somebody would like to take that on and write the short letter. Someone who's good at writing would like to do that.
Anyone?
I'll do it.
All right. Does anyone else want to help Lisa do it?
You can, you
I'll
and I can
copy you.
email together.
Yeah.
We can work on.
Do it,
that.
yeah,
email.
do a joint. I like when more than one person is inputting. That's great. Thank you.
Village's noise ordinance doesn't start until after 7. And it's over fairly early in the morning.
What,
So it's like
What
7 to
time?
5 or something.
I think it's like 7 to 5, yeah.
Really?
Maybe 7 to 6.
ugh,
Wait,
Different
what are the
towns
times
have
for the
different
village?
versions of it.
7 PM to 6 AM, she thinks.
or 5 a.m.
Okay.
Yeah. All right.
Actually, you know what's interesting, because somebody I know has said that her neighbor, the landscapers come at like 7 o'clock on a Saturday morning.
Hmm. Hmm.
Which, you know,
They come, I think, across the street from me at that time, but
leaf blowers.
I'm,
this
I'm
building
awake
at
at 5,
6,
so I
so-
don't really care.
What's that?
They do this building at 6, so I don't think we're,
No,
so clearly the noise ordinance can't be too late in the morning.
Aggressive.
So I don't think, I mean, I'm not gonna stand in the way of a noise ordinance, but I don't think it's actually gonna address a lot of the things that
Mm.
people have been concerned about. It may address concerns with Airbnbs if they become loud. But mining is not gonna happen at night.
But a decibel level will.
do-
If, I mean, I don't think we would want to rely on a noise ordinance for stopping Taylor Oil because the concerns with that weren't about the noise.
Oh,
And it
that's
was
the
stopped
one.
for the reasons that were of the most import.
right.
That's a good point.
No, several of the neighbors complained specifically about
I
the
understand
noise.
that there was noise, but having a noise ordinance that tells them they can't make noise off hours does not stop concrete.
No, that
Doesn't
was-
stop the other
those are
problem.
other
No, the
issues.
other issues.
Other issues.
Right,
it's
so
another
it got stopped
arrow
for
in
the
the
reasons
quiver.
it really
Right.
should have.
Right.
Is the mailman application, are they
It was
not gonna
withdrawn.
pursue it?
It was withdrawn.
Wonder if they're gonna come back.
The particular, what was withdrawn, you correct me if I'm wrong, what was withdrawn was the application at the moment before the ZBA.
Hmm.
It doesn't mean they can't come back with, and I've seen this several times with people come back with slightly modified plans for the same thing. And
That would have to go back through the town board and then getting a lead agency and not having a negative declaration,
Yeah.
and, all. of
And I'm
that.
not sure, this is just me speaking, so this is not official in any way. I'm not sure if he can't still just bring it back because he's withdrawn it. There may be a time limit before it becomes officially withdrawn. He can, I don't know. This is just off the top of my head. Could he come back and say, oh, yeah, I think I want to put it back on again? Is there like 30-day limit or 60-day limit that you have before you're officially done with the application? I think there's something somewhere about 62 days elsewhere for other things, that once it comes before the board, they've got 62 days to act on it. Something like that somewhere else floating around. And
Mhm.
so, but I personally, think he's running out of time. I think he's already very close to the end, but the answer to your question is he can come back with something slightly different.
I wouldn't be surprised.
I
if
wouldn't
he
be
does.
surprised either.
Yeah.
I'm anticipating it.
Yeah. That's it. And the answer to the other question about the noise ordinance, during the day, there's decibel limits in some of these ordinances. So that even during the day, you can't like start up a huge amount of work on a neighbor's property if you're too close to that neighbor. And some of the ordinances, they limit the noise that you can make during the day too. Different towns have different versions, so it's not fixed.
It would be worth looking at what other towns have
Yes.
and how they're enforcing it and whether or not they do. Because we
Right.
have a lot of code that's difficult to enforce.
Right. And I think through history in the town, that's part of the reason why they've never,
Addressed it.
yeah,
Mhm.
because it's not enforceable.
It's
Because
not necess-
everyone's level or to a certain degree level is different to their interpretation. What would annoy you might
That's a
not
good
annoy
point.
me.
No, they put decibels in them. No more.
But then who's gonna come
Somebody's
out
gotta
with a
monitor
with a
it.
decibel
Which is
Which is
rater?
fine, it may be
And-
fine, but it'd be worth seeing how other
Correct.
towns do that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So it's somebody else's interpretation first would be a wise research.
This
for sure.
happened in the village before there was Inucci's there. There was something called Sotero's there, and they had a big bar in the back.
Yeah,
Nice bar.
nice bar.
And
Well,
people
we
used to go out. Yeah, people
Yeah,
used to go out in
Inucci's.
the backyard from the bar, and it was right next to a neighbor. And he kept complaining and complaining and complaining. Finally, they did something about it. They went out and measured the noise, among
Hmm.
other things,
Hmm.
and it finally stopped. So the answer is you can do that. And they did have a decibel meter, if I recall correctly.
I'm just saying that's in the village, and the village has a noise ordinance.
Yes,
It is much more difficult
Out in
for
the-
a town to have neighbors calling the town on neighbors for having loud noises.
That's a good point.
It's not necessarily it may be all well-meaning, but it's not necessarily something that's been effective at limiting noise. I think it would be worth seeing if the ordinances have actually been effective. My guess is that things get shut down for other reasons first.
Hmm.
well,
Unless you're in a
it would
village
allow
where
the zoning administrator to
it's
come
easy.
out there, especially those people who were affected. I think
Mhm.
the neighbor did do some recordings and stuff like that. It would allow the person to get this discussion going, at least with the neighbor. That we have this ordinance, you may be violating some of it. What can we do to compromise and work with the neighbor? When you have nothing, the neighbor just do what I want.
I mean, Taylor Oil, it already happened, right? That
Mm.
it did start a conversation.
Who are we talking about now?
Taylor
It
Ward.
was already a complaint. It was brought forward amongst
Yes.
other things, and it was part of the discussion.
It wouldn't have,
I'm-
it could have been a lot
it just
easier.
maybe-
It would have been a lot easier if the ordinance we had an ordinance.
Maybe. It's worth looking into.
Right.
Well,
So it's a
It'd be an
research,
yeah,
it's a research
It's a
and
resource.
a letter.
so
if
Another
y'all-
another
If
tool for the.
necessary.
If necessary to the
zoning
town, yeah.
administrator too.
Yeah.
And
So-
the fact that almost all the other towns have something, we should have something too. I mean, it's just silly that we have nothing.
We will let Elizabeth and Lisa do the researching. Thank you. Appreciate it. Appreciate it. Now, Adelaide, I see you're on. Did you have any comments or questions this evening? We did the CSC update already anyway.
Right, I know. Sorry, I was on the road. I thought it started.
Fine.
No, I don't. I mean, unless you guys have some.
Nope.
No, we're all in a good place, I think.
Okay, good.
All right, good to see you.
Nice to see you.
Leslie, do you have anything for us?
No, nothing, except I think you guys, you clarified the date. It's the next PACE training is the 22nd
Yeah.
at 4:30. So
Yeah.
it was really great for those who weren't able to make it. And I know Howard and Margaret, you were there, and Elizabeth, you were there. But I think we all found it very worthwhile. So it'd be, we would all be be glad you came on the 22nd if you're able to join.
That would be
Yeah.
great.
Are the PACE people going to post the Zoom link? The one they just had?
You know, you mean the Zoom link or the recording of that?
Yeah.
Yes, I'm going to follow up on that. That was actually the town's recording Zoom, not Pace's. So I will follow up with Mary Alex about that because I do believe we did record it, and I had the same thought that it'd be helpful for those that weren't able to attend, to be able to at least view the recording. We do have also Margaret Peel operational. Sorry about that. He wasn't free today to do it, but he's, I guess, free tomorrow around noon to come fix it for
Sorry.
tomorrow night.
Awesome.
It was
That was Poor Leslie. All right. Well, I think.
So-
that's closed.
So the-
People, you know, the town dealing with Zoom over the past couple of years because you know, I was trained, and I'm saying that in quotes. So were you? Margaret was there, and a bunch of us.
Yep.
We could
I know.
go through all the steps. We typed them all up, and we still had a hiccup. So,
Yeah.
so anyways, baby steps. We're getting there.
Yep, definitely. Thank you, Leslie.
I think that's why sometimes they offer their staff, they have staff that they'll come and help you run it if you have a complicated.
Yes. Yeah, for
Well,
sure.
there was just a computer change and that's what caused it to be the problem. They're fixing it tomorrow.
That's good.
What do you think about the new time?
Oh,
Fine.
does everybody love the new time?
Fine.
I'm loving
I
it.
was gonna comment that I love the new time. If that matters, I mean, I'll go anytime. But I was gonna say, Margaret, great suggestion on the time change.
Thank you. And I think it's working out and it's our new time. So, and we've made it in time. We went under an hour, even starting late.
Wow.
So, do I have a motion?
Jump back and kiss ourselves.
I know. Anyone have a motion to close?
I have motion to close.
Second.
Elizabeth and then Howard. All in favor? Aye. We're off. Thank you guys for joining us. Bye, Leslie. Bye, Adelaide.
See you soon. Bye,
Good
everybody.
night. Good
Thanks,
night.
everyone.
Hit end.